I am playing a FIDE master. My opponent was Martin Rafe, a 2200 FIDE master from Cambridge, England, and I had the white pieces. Now, my opponent has not played a tournament in I think a year, and so not many games were there on the database, and I think they were expired because this tournament my opponent was playing something new, and I caught up on it in the previous rounds where my opponent played e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, takes, and then knight f6. And this usually tells me that we are going into a Sveshnikov. Now, his opponent in like round 6 had taken here on c6, and that's not what I play. So from here on out, I don't know what my opponent plays. I go knight c3. My opponent goes e5, knight b5, typical Sveshnikov defense. d6 is played, and usually white likes to go bishop g5, very, very classic and the most popular ever line against the Sveshnikov, but recently, in the past 8 years, the more popular one is knight d5, which I think I've played once before in a tournament, and I don't remember when or where that was, but I played knight d5, or I prepared against it, or something like this. Knight takes, and I take with the pawn, attacking this knight. And really, black has two moves here, knight b8 or knight e7. My opponent chooses knight b8. And the idea is to go this, and then knight f6, like recycle that knight over time. Here, I had some very nice prep prepared. I go with a4. And there's a very sick idea with this. After a6, knight a3, the knight kind of maneuvers to the wanted square, the desired square where this knight belongs, which is c4. The knight on c4 outlooks on b6 and a5, outlooks on d6 and e5, and also creates some a5 knight b6 things, and can be very, very nice. And so bishop e7 is played. Now I go bishop e2, castles, and bishop d2. Bishop t2. It looks like I'm developing like a 2-year-old here. I'm placing my bishops in front of my king. But bishop d2 has a really nice idea. First of all, prophylactically on bishop e3, you don't lose a tempo to f5, f4 things that attack your bishop. So bishop d2 stays away from those things and looks on to support a5. a5 is a nice move that if I get, I go knight c4, which can then go lead to knight b6 things, etc. That's why my opponent responds with a second pawn move in the opening. a5 is played, and Ivan Saric proposes this and says, this is fine for white, bishop b5, and we're going to place our knight on c4, and the white pieces are going to be doing well. And this is exactly what I followed. Thank you, Mr. GM Ivan Saric. f5 is played, I go queen e2, hinting at this, but not really, maybe, but I also want to go castles. My opponent has f4 things, but not really, and e4 things, but not really because of bishop c3. So it's a bit of an early push. Usually against f5, you want to play f4, just to stop the black pieces in their tracks, and even Ivan Saric recommends to go immediately f4 when you see f5, and you haven't castled yet. So f5 should be played by black, but only once white castles. Knight a6 is played. Knight a6 is not theory. Knight b7, and now knight f6 is theory. Knight a6 is not something I know, so I took a bit of time here and then came up with just knight c4. So attacking this based on the weakness that knight a6 created and placing my knight to the desired square where we know we thrive. My opponent goes knight c5. And here the move, I don't know this, I really don't. It's the first time I'm playing this ever. The move is bishop e3 to take this, but I don't come up with that. It's kind of counterintuitive. You're moving a bishop twice in the opening. Instead, I go with b4. Thematic for the opening, but not the right time to play this. Better was f4 or castles. b4, a takes, bishop takes. And now queen c7, and the engine says that black is just a little bit better here, which is actually surprising given I have so many pieces here. My opponent goes with queen c7 and is a bit better in this position, and now I drop a bomb on my opponent. f4 played on the board. It's a pawn sacrifice, and it really has a lot of meaning to me, personally. Okay, f4, aims to play against this bishop. So I'm stopping this f5 pawn in its tracks, and this bishop becomes less than good, less than active, less than great to be developed. If this bishop is bad, this rook is not connected with this rook, and this rook is probably a little bit passive. So f4. Black has really two options, unless developing the bishop is one. Developing the bishop is one. But let's say two options. e4 to get a bishop out, but I had calculated after castles, bishop here and rook a3, check, and nothing was really dangerous here, and things can actually be dangerous against you because I have some nice rook swings with queen h5 and counter-attacking the king, which is a turn of events in and of itself. So this I was fine with, and then e takes f4 was actually played in the game. E takes f4 was played, I was about to castle, and then I observed something that I loved. I really profoundly fell in love with this. Bishop takes f5. And you can't take because I'm winning the bishop, right? You're not defending this anymore. So it forces a move to take here. And here, my pawn is a passed pawn now. It's very, very strong if it can get to d6. And I think it can happen if I castle and I put some rooks on these open files. And overall, I don't see how the black position progresses. I don't see how these pawns are any ever good ever against my king. And this bishop stays trash. The bishop doesn't have bishop d7 anymore because of bishop takes, queen takes, and knight b6 to fork these pieces. So after takes, my opponent does not take that much time and plays f3. f3 is a blunder, and I want you to find why. White to play and win in this position. Of course, you don't have me saying that in the game, but in this position, it's a really big toss-up. The idea that black has is they want to deflect my queen off of this bishop, so queen takes f3, queen takes c5 is now possible, and in hopes of seeking maybe like a small advantage, right? And if I take like this, there's probably bishop h4 check. There's a slight problem with this variation. Although my queen is attacked and my bishop is attacked, I have a way to save everyone and retain my piece up. And that is the slight move bishop b6. It's a beautiful move. I took like 7 minutes. 6 of those minutes was to make sure that bishop b6 was winning and that my FM opponent did blunder. The idea is that if you sack your queen here and create a desperado, I can take your queen, and after you take mine, I take this rook and I'm up a full rook, completely winning. So black has to do something here that's concrete. The queen is trapped, so if queen b8, I saw that it was completely over after queen takes e8, e7. And so this is pretty much the only move. If you take my queen, I take with a piece up, by the way. And if you do check, it transposes. So takes on g2, I take on g2, and then check. My king is out of the woods. I play this mistake, king d1. That disconnects my rooks. Actually, the counterintuitive king d2 and this crazy line by the engine that says that my king should go to b4 where it's safe is absolutely wild. Take a look. That's the main engine line giving +3 in this position. Absolutely wild. None of this happened. I went to d1 and now queen e7. And here is something very important that I missed. In this position, I have to bring back my pieces to defend because I'm up a piece. If I can defend well and then just trade pieces, I will win the game. That is the plan. And so here I absolutely have to play bishop d4. I have to prevent any scaling of an attack against me, any brightening of my opponent's pieces, while I want to counterattack on these weaknesses with rook g1 and then attacking g7. Bishop d4 is crucial. But I, being the player that I am, rushed into this and tried to trade queens, or wanted to trade queens and force another tempo out of black. And then I played rook a3, defending my rook. And now f4 is played. And now I'm in true trouble. I considered so many moves from this position, it's actually insane. I looked at this, I looked at this, I looked at this that was losing, I looked at this, I looked at this. Basically on rook f3, I saw that it loses to queen a1. On rook f1, I thought I lost on f3, but this is a mistake. Apparently you sack the exchange with rook here, and then I saw bishop here. But rook takes, bishop takes, king takes, and then bishop takes. And after knight takes d6, you're completely winning actually. 2 minor pieces and a passed pawn for a rook, and a non-passed pawn is completely winning. But I was still scared of that variation. I was not going, I wanted to keep my pawn up, my piece up, sorry. I want to keep my piece up. Knight d2 I looked at as well, just passive for me. Bishop here, stuff like this. So I eventually went with bishop f2, trying to trade some bishops. f3 is played, and I go with queen e3. Although, once again, sacking the rook for the 2 minor pieces is completely winning here for white. The engine gives +2, and on a top engine high depth, +4 for the white pieces, completely winning. So f3, and now I go queen e3 here. And I'm giving bishop h3 with bishop g2, and I had calculated that this is basically, I'm giving this pawn. And black will have 3 passed pawns here, and it's a toss-up, honestly. My opponent does not go for bishop h3, although after the game, we looked at bishop h3, and goes for bishop g5. I was relieved because this gives me queen c3, pardon, not queen d4, because of takes, and f2, and then this bishop slides in, and it's like literally a mate threat, bro. I'm not about to do that. So I want to go with queen c3 to try to trade queens, and if takes, I take back with a rook, and my bishop can stay defending this pawn. My bishop is like gravel up against this pawn. It's not moving ever unless you give me like $1 million and the win. So queen c3, queen f4 is played, threatening checkmate. I have to defend this well. Apparently knight d2 is that much better than what I played knight e3. And knight e3 gives this bishop h3 resource again, which is probably winning this h2 pawn for black, but my opponent misses it and plays bishop f5. And now I try to trade queens again. And after bishop e4, pause this video for me in this position for white and type in the comments found it if you found it, that here white has a good move. I'll let you pause the video. 3, 2, 1. I have a good move. I have bishop g3. Bishop g3 attacks this queen and forces this queen off the defense of the bishop, and I win a piece. So I look at this, I'm very amused. I have 12 minutes left on my clock. I'm going for bishop g3. But here my opponent has a crazy resource that I saw. After bishop g3, my opponent can go queen f6. And when I take this bishop, my opponent now has queen b2, attacking this rook and threatening queen b1 to win this rook. And it is extremely hard to find a way to defend both in this position. Actually, it's so extremely hard that it is impossible. The best move here is to play rook f1. Giving back your rook, you have 2 pieces for a rook now, but your king is in the center and it's a mess. Bishop d3 to threaten mate, g6, queen e6, rook here, and then rook takes f3, and here white are winning. That is one way to go about it. The way I saw it is that I would have played bishop d3 first, attacking this, g6 played, queen e6 check, and then after rook f7, I was going to play rook b3. Queen a1 check, king d2 up, and then I'm sacking the rook because I can't defend it all. Then I take on b7 is what I saw. And here in the analysis, we actually saw with my opponent that this is a draw. After takes, I can't take like this because of rook takes b7 and I lose. So king takes, and we saw that after this here, the king cannot find asylum, and this is eventually a draw. But after king check, queen c1, king d4, check, king e4, and suddenly after check and king e3, black has no more checks. And we go into this wild endgame in which rook e8, defended by the queen, pins my queen. I take here, rook takes, and then pawn takes. I didn't see any of this, by the way. And I go into a rook and 2 bishop endgame that is winning. Crazy. Crazy, 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 crazy. This was not played. My opponent, in fact, didn't even see queen f6. How? It's so nice. and played bishop takes c2. For me, this was the equivalent of giving up, so I just took and I played quickly here. And a few moves later, after rook a3, a scary attempt, queen g2. I saw the defense here. Yeah, it's really weird, sacking a queen, but you're attacking my queen and threatening mate. But I saw before taking that queen that I have a bishop taking up f1. So after rook g1, the simple rook f1, rook g1, I can sack the queen back and be 2 bishops up. And in this position, my opponent resigned. I beat an fn. Very, very nice win. I think it's the first FM that I beat in my life. And I think I have an equal score against FMs. So I have 1.5 out of 3 against FMs. I'm not sure though. Double check me. This marks my 49th OTB game, over the board tournament game, since August 2023 when we started these recaps together in Maya, Portugal. Tomorrow, I'll be posting my 50th game over the board in the past 6 months. This journey is still going so strong, and it's thanks to you who is supporting this content, liking these videos, subscribing to the channel, and honestly, I am so grateful to be able to share my passion while carrying a smile and making a small living. Thank you so much, and see you in the final round of the Cambridge Open, in which I'm playing an international master.